There we go. All right. So back to introducing Bryant. So he comes to us with a lot of experience. His main goals for today is going to be talking about basically the changing landscape for developing, marketing, selling, and buying digital solutions, specifically within upstream oil and gas. And then at the end, he's going to also give us some kind of insight into the Society of Petroleum Engineers Startup Village and the pivotal role that it plays in basically disseminating the exchange of technology and information within the industry. So a little bit about Bryant. He's the director of sales at Aspentech. He's a global leader in industrial optimization software. He has over 25 years in developing, marketing, and selling these softwares and digital solutions. And he's held multiple leadership positions between Schlumberger and Halliburton, and also several technology-based startups. He's got his degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Tulsa, where he actually was also a NCAA Division I soccer player, which is pretty cool because I've always been a big soccer fan. And then he plays a big part on the mechanical engineering advisory board there. He's an active SPE member, and as I've already kind of alluded to, he's involved in the Startup Village Committee, which is something that's also really cool, and we'll get a sneak preview. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Charles. See if share my screen real quick. And we'll go to, let's see, where am I sharing? Like that. Might not be. Why is it not showing? All right, you see my screen? It says high tech or high touch. And I'm in slide mode.
Yes.
And you can still see me?
Yes.
All right, good. Well, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the time today. As Charles mentioned, I'm a longtime SPE member and volunteer. I'm excited to work with your section. The local sections, and particularly the study groups within local sections, are the lifeblood of SPE International. You know, it may feel from time to time like there's this corporate behemoth that makes all the decisions, but the reality is this is a member-driven organization. It's a volunteer-driven organization, and it takes creative and active people like all of you to keep the professional society alive. I first started as, you know, on the facilities engineering study group in Gulf Coast section, and eventually made my way to being an international board member. Now I'm a co-founder of the Startup Village. It's just a deep passion of mine that people should be involved in the professional societies. And if you're asking me which one to join, I'm going to tell you SPE because that's my favorite. Today, yeah, I'll talk to you a little bit about my experience in high-tech digital sales and solutions, and kind of give you just some food for thought based on my experiences. And I'll speak to you both as an audience of sellers and audience of buyers. I think our industry is evolving rapidly. And there's some interesting just observations I've made in our industry. And then, like Charles said, I'll conclude with talking to you about the Startup Village, why I'm volunteering with it, why I think it's important and relevant for sections like yours to pay attention to it. And I'll make an ask for your help as we get to the end. Okay, so just to wake everybody up in the audience, kind of a mental challenge for you. If you were to go to a doctor's office, you walked in, the doctor told you, look, I don't use technology. It's just me and my staff. We're a bunch of humans. We're capable, qualified, and you should trust us. I think most of us in this day and age would pause and probably question that and think twice about going to a doctor who says, I don't believe in x-rays, and I don't believe in CAT scans, and I don't believe in using computers. It would probably make us all pause and run away for a second. But in the same respect, if you walked into a doctor's office today and there was nothing but robots, and you know, you've been to certain buildings where it's just a machine to check in and you're talking to a screen. If you're going to a doctor for your own health, you'd probably, I know I would, and probably most of you, there may be some of you adventurous ones out there, but you'd probably pause and think, I'm not comfortable with this yet. I'm not ready to go 100% automation and machine when it comes to my personal health. And I think when you look at upstream oil and gas, and in my company where we dance on both sides, upstream and downstream, our industry as a whole has said, this is a concern we have. We're not ready to 100% turn our entire industry over. to automation, to robotic workflows and artificial intelligence, et cetera. But we are turning over some workflows. And I want you to think about just this challenge as I go through the talk today about where is our comfort zone and at what point do you hand over automation and give up control of what you do. You may have heard this little sentence phrase that I'm about to talk about, but there's a man named Warren Bennis who years ago said the factory of the future will only have 2 employees, a man and a dog. The man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to keep the man from touching the equipment. And those of us like me who for years have been selling automation and continuing to use compute power and outsourcing power to speed up our life, even I have always questioned if this will ever really happen, if we'll ever get to that point. But it is a dystopian view, and it was originally said in kind of a dystopian way, but I think a lot of us know certain work processes that have already achieved 100% automation. But as a member of a technology sales organization, I've worked with some very large ones, and I've talked to a lot of oil and gas companies around the world. The human versus machine debate still looks a little bit more like this, where there are human employees, all of us on this call who are employed by someone or self-employed, using technology and trying to automate certain workflows and certain processes. And just like when old handwritten spreadsheets became Excel spreadsheets or Lotus Notes, whatever, how far back you want to go, there are certain tasks that we offload. My children today can't spell to save their life because everything they type is autocorrected for them. So there are certain things that we as an industry have already become comfortable with automating. And as we look at moving things out to the edge, and we look at outsourcing compute power to the cloud, and we look at automating things that used to be done by humans, such as adjusting valves. You know, most modern oil field and refining processes have automatic controllers that adjust pressure, temperature, flow rate on different pieces of equipment in our field. And those are controlled by a piece of software. And the software is getting more and more intelligent and self-healing and learning and artificial intelligence. But at some point in the daisy chain of control in our industry, there is a human that says, I've agreed to the workflow, or I've agreed to the technology that's going to be implemented and the way that it is going to touch my field or my equipment. And if you're a driller, you've heard many companies are aiming for humanless drilling, that the highest risk we have when we're drilling wells is the humans on the rigs. And if you've been a driller for a while, or if you've been involved with drilling rigs, you can see over time where automation and machines have taken over. When I first broke out, I still slung chains around the drill pipe to pull them off, but you really don't have those anymore. You have the automated roughnecks that are spinning pipe for you. And that's just a small example of how do we make it safer for humans, but not give up the control we have in the instincts. And this debate back and forth of human versus machine, I think, is going to be present in our industry for many, many years to come. And I think it's technology organizations like the ones we work for and professional societies like SPE, where our mission of SPE is to the dissemination of technology, to continually educate what the possible is and what technology is available and what it can do, and to inform the decision makers of where the risks lie and when outsourcing certain things. You know, it may become, in certain pockets of our industry, it may seem obvious to those of you who are digital natives who come up with digital in your back pocket ever since you came out of high school and gone through college and are now in industry. But there are some interesting hurdles around the planet still with cloud. For example, in Saudi Arabia, there is a concern about data in the kingdom must stay in the kingdom. And as soon as you ask the question of where that data gets uploaded and where that actual server sits, if you've crossed the geographic boundaries, you automatically have a problem. So it's not that the kingdom has a problem with cloud, it has a problem with the geography of it. When you look at edge computing, when we talk about automating processes at a well site or a production site, we still have questions around battery power, bandwidth of mobile and cellular control. And if you look at, I'll talk about at the end, some of the technologies that were presented at the SPE annual conference this year, we had a network communications company as a startup that was looking to break down some of the challenges we have with just getting connectivity to the field. So the question of where we outsource, we're not doing carrier pigeons or Harry Potter owls anymore. We're using cellular and wired transmission. But all of us are in kind of a role. I don't think you can say any more than an oil company is just an oil company. Everyone's in a technology company, and it's how do we put it to use? So where am I going with this? Well, I'm going to challenge you a little bit on shifting your thinking from the application of technology, which in my view is pretty straightforward. That's what most of us do, is we seek out and try to put technology to use. The question of identifying the technology is something that maybe you haven't thought as much about as I have as running a sales organization. So to use an analog, there's an emotional response that some of you may have to this, that the idea of going and buying a new car from a used car salesman, there is a stereotype that is at least propagated on television. I'd say I have friends who sell cars and they hate this analogy and this stereotype, but it is real. I've sold my car to a bunch of used car sales people that I would never actually buy from because they paid me good money and I don't think they did a good job inspecting what I was selling them. But when we look at our own personal B2C life cycle, so our business to consumer, what we do as a personal shopper and the amount of money we have control over and our knowledge of what we're trying to buy, the question is, do we need this person on the screen to help us decide if we want this car, if it's sufficient or not? Well, I would argue that most of you, I know I have shifted our car buying process to leveraging the internet. And there are now 100% closed loop sales cycles that are 100% internet, no humans, no active humans involved, if you will. Carvana and autotrader.com are not going to tell you how many employees are really behind the scenes pulling the curtains and the strings. But the reality is we as buyers have decided that we don't need as much help as maybe we used to, and that we feel more educated and more empowered. And these companies have made us feel better about our buying journey and our shopping journey by the way they've delivered information to us. But you'll hear a theme with me. There is a price that you've already mentally come associated with. It says, okay, at what price am I comfortable buying 100% from a computer? And what complexity of technology am I comfortable buying 100% from a computer? I personally am not an HVAC expert. Last time I had to upgrade the air conditioner in my house, I didn't just go buy online. I spoke to a person and had them talk to me about all my options because I didn't feel like I could do the research on my own. So as you think about this, I'm going to challenge you to take the leap towards the technology sales and process. And I'll take you back a little bit. So I think I graduated in 1995. I went to work for an operator, but in 97, I joined a technology startup and I joined SPE at the same time. My boss said, go join SPE and sell to everyone at SPE. And as you all know, as SPE members, it doesn't quite work that way, but it was a great reason for me to go join a study group was to understand how dissemination of technology works. But the way it used to work when I first started selling software and technology is I carried a projector and a laptop with me, and I would go on airplanes, travel around town. We would meet in conference rooms. And the first exposure that a potential customer would have to the technology would be a human bringing in on a laptop and a projector into a room. And so you may have heard about the technology from a peer or a friend, or the salesperson calling you up and saying, hey, I know you have certain challenges and problems. Would you like to hear about what technology I have that might solve your problems? And this was a very individualized sales process. It's a very linear and slow. And if you're a buyer, you had to do this with 5 or 6 vendors. This whole process of having a vendor coming to your office, bringing their computer and their projector. As things got more advanced, you'd show up and the customer would say, well, we have our own projector, and then they wouldn't be compatible. I mean, all of these challenges of this individual pursuit was a very real part of selling technology and building technology awareness. In addition, tell me if this gives you PTSD or the heebie-jeebies in our COVID era, that we used to actually have trade shows with thousands of people packed together, shoulder to shoulder, breathing on each other, just to go learn about the latest technology that's being brought to market. And so as buyers or academia, or even investors or technology solution providers that were looking for possible acquisitions or ideas, we would go to the technology this way. We would have to go to a trade show. We'd have to go sit in all the paper sessions. We'd walk through all the booths, try to become more informed about what technology is possibly available and we should possibly be considering for our corporation. So leap forward now, and let's be real, the trade show and the traveling salesman of the days back for technology sales has been replaced by the internet. And I think we all know it. It's there, it's a real thing. It's either professional societies going virtual, it's your Google searches, it's watching YouTube videos, etc. And it has completely changed the way we search and we educate ourselves on technology in our industry. And it really doesn't have much of a price threshold, and I'll talk about that. On the initial question of, I have a business problem, what solutions might be out there for me? Almost all of us immediately go to Google. I think you might secondarily go to your social media to say, the social media back up what I search for on my own. But my first search terms are most likely in Google, and for high-tech people, most likely in Chrome. And then you're going to go look at your professional societies and your social media and your peer network to validate some of the things you've searched for. And if you look at this process, this is a very simplified process that I'm just throwing on the screen, and some of my technology leaders might cringe at how simple this workflow looks. But there is a method to the madness for anyone buying technology, whether you're buying a car or you're buying some artificial lift optimization or a plant refinery optimization, supply chain optimization. It doesn't really matter. There is a problem that you're trying to solve that to begin with, that something's not doing what you expect it to, or it's not working as well as you would like it to, or you wonder if it could work better. The next natural step is what technology, what might I do? You could say what humans are there. I should be fair to the humans out there. What humans could solve this problem for me? For the sake of this presentation, we're talking technology. What technology exists that might solve this problem? And then the natural question of, can it really address my problem? The technology I've identified, does it actually potentially solve the problems that I'm attempting to solve? And then we're going into, well, how much does it cost? Is there a business case for doing this? Can I justify the investment in whatever solution I've chosen, and will it deliver the return that I expect in a timely manner that my investors, whether it's me self-employed or I'm in a Fortune 500 company, will tolerate? And then there's a mechanical thing at the end of negotiating that price, getting a contract, and then acquiring whatever technology, whether it's a PLC controller, or it's a piece of software, or a combination thereof. They all have a similar workflow that we go through. One of the things that we teach our sales organization, and I would challenge you if you're on the sales side, or look in a mirror if you're on the buyer side, is, the modern technology buyer, we know, is more comfortable doing their research on their own using search engines. It is a real fact, and you can't escape it, and you need to be aware of it. And most buyers guide themselves through their own buying process of self-diagnosing. And I would argue in the personal medical world, we're going there as well, right? The WebMD and the Mayo Clinic online, what are the symptoms of COVID? Might I have COVID? I've been coughing. Google, tell me, am I sick or not, before I actually go through the hassle of going to see a doctor? Well, we as engineers or scientists are doing the same thing in our world, whether you're a software programmer writing technology to be sold, or you're a buyer of software or digital solutions. You're self-diagnosing first. You think you know what the problem is, and determining what you're looking for as a solution. Then the next question is there any evidence that there are solutions out there? Case studies, articles being written, proof, videos, examples, whatever. And typically, a modern buyer can do this for all of the providers that are out there and can do some initial vendor comparisons of what technology is available. Most modern buyers, because of this process and because of their personal consumer experience, want to be more in control of the buying process. It is not like when I started my career, where the entire awareness to sale and acquisition process was driven mostly by the vendor because the buyer doesn't really know much about the technology. And so the supplier is brought in at the very beginning and kind of navigating them through and becoming a trusted advisor all the way to the end. Well, it's really changed now that most buyers are way more educated at the beginning of a buying process and kind of dictate the process more so than the past. But to compare, as I've done throughout the high tech, high touch, the thing that still exists in our industry and is still a major part of technology sales and technology deployment and awareness is this technology sales expert, whether you call them technical sales or sales account manager or consultative sales, solution consultants, I think is what we call them, solution consultants here at Halliburton, we call them technical sales. The reality is there are people who are employed by the technology provider that know it better than anyone else on the planet. They've been intimately involved with it from its initiation and know what it does and can explain why it was built the way it does and what it's supposed to do. But even more valuable for a technology buyer is the fact that the technology salesperson has spoken to each of your competitors and peers in the market and has had conversations with them about their individual problems and how technology can be applied, which makes them very familiar with the business challenges in the industry, at least the common ones, and very familiar with the technical challenges that are in the industry. I know everyone's special and everyone's unique, so every company has a unique business problem and a unique technology problem, technical problem, but for the most part, most of them have common translation across companies. But the point I'm trying to make is that these technical salespeople know how to apply their technology situationally because they've applied it in so many different environments and so many different places with so many different shapes and sizes of companies. When they come to your company, the value they bring is being able to understand and say, well, here's where you're unique and here's where you're not. And here's how my technology might solve your problem. And assessing your unique situation, adapting to it is still incredibly valuable. Now, the question comes, at what point do I need to bring these people in? And do I ever need to bring these experts in? Well, I would say that when you are challenging yourself as a buyer or a seller between the high tech and the high tech balance, there are a couple of key things to keep in mind. As you're asking yourself about the problem, if the problem is crystal clear, maybe it's one you've dealt with many times before, you don't deem it complex, it's something that you understand very well, you have used an existing technology repeatedly with great success, of which you are familiar with the cost, maybe you even have an existing contract for that technology, and you are crystal clear on the return on investment because you've already used it, I would argue, continue to do self-service and high tech. We sell software at my company that's been around for 30 years, and I know I have customers that when they hire a new employee and want to give that employee access to our software, they really don't need to talk to anyone in my company. They have a pre-negotiated contract, they know which version of the software, they know how to install it, and they teach it themselves. And I think that will continue to evolve in our industry of more and more technology in high-tech industries will be able to be acquired, identified and acquired 100% closed loop without the traditional salespeople involved. But I think on the other side of the spectrum, you will continue to have these questions of if there is any uncertainty in the problems you're trying to address. I would encourage you buyers to remember what I said on the previous slide, that the typical technology salesperson not only has a better understanding of the technology than you do, but they've also seen it in use, in play at other companies. And you can learn valuable lessons from them and how your peer companies have actually used the technology and how to put it to work. Now, when we look at the comparison of buying a car or buying a license of software, I think a lot of our upstream and downstream operators, when buying technology, have authority thresholds on expenditures. And so there's going to be a point where if you are outlaying a certain amount of cash to acquire technology, your leadership and your investors are going to question your decision-making if you have said, I don't need to speak to anyone at this technology provider because I'm so smart and I know it so well. I think if you're buying a $5,000 piece of software, you might not even get a batted eye, but a piece of software or an automation system that costs $5 million a year, most likely your investors are going to ask you what due diligence you've done. And in most cases, they're going to say, have you spoken to the leaders of that company, that technology provider? Are you comfortable that what they say it can do, it can actually do? Have you seen a demonstration? Now, as we go through this as an industry, I challenge all of the technology providers out there to remember that on the high-tech self-service side of the industry, that's not going away. We have to continue to invest in our online marketing, our digital solutions, our ability for our customers to become more educated without us. And I think that as arrogant as a technology sales organization can be, that we know more than the buyer, the reality is the buyer doesn't want to talk to you up front like they used to. And the more of your knowledge you can put online, you can put into professional society presentations, you can put demonstrations. You know, it used to be I was the only one who could open up the software and run it, and you would ask me, can I do this, this, and this? And I would live do mouse clicks and things. We slowly started recording my demonstrations when I first started out in software technical sales. Then we finally got comfortable with actually putting those demonstrations on the internet and saying, I'll let you watch them without me in the room, and you come to me with questions. If you look at the modern university, there's a concept called the flipped classroom. More and more university professors are recording their lectures in advance, having the students watch them, submit their questions, and then come to class to only deal with the questions. There's a reason universities are doing this. It's because it works. It is an effective teaching methodology. So as technology providers and solution providers, I'm challenging our industry. We need to realize this is the norm, and it's only going to go more so that we need to continue to invest in that and challenge ourselves for self-service acquisition of technology. Can we make it where a buyer can acquire new tech, order like Amazon? I'm going to go on and order 5 new drill bits from Amazon. Can I do that without a human? I don't know, but I think our industry is going there. I know some technology can already be acquired there, and it's headed there. And then my final challenge to the buyers is just remember there are some experts out there that really have some valuable information. And as you're looking at this teeter-totter of where to lean on them, don't forget them. They're pretty valuable people out there. Okay, Charles, what I was thinking is I was going to pause. I was going to shift over to the ATCE Startup Village and then maybe take questions at the end. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that works for me.
All right. So I'm going to shift hats, but talking about technology dissemination, the role of groups like this, trade shows, SPE, et cetera. I am a part of the SPE Startup Village, and I really enjoy this event. I think we founded it 4 or 5 years ago. I'm losing track of time now. I'm going to walk you through what it is and why I think it's valuable, and ask for your attention as we rehost this event in the fall. So I think we held our 4th one this past fall. It was 100% virtual. Our last 2 have been 100% virtual because of COVID, but before that we were live. This is a Startup Village is a partnership between Society of Petroleum Engineers and the Rice Alliance for Technology and Entrepreneurship at Rice University. We are 100% sponsor run as an event, so there are no SPE member dues used to put this event on. And so very grateful for the sponsors this year. This is just this year's sponsors. We've had sponsors every year. Baker Hughes and NOV, who were our gold sponsors. Chevron, Hess, Devon, and Schlumberger, who stepped up as silver sponsors, and SCF Ventures as one of our bronze sponsors. And the format of the event is a half-day startup competition, think Shark Tank, where we have companies apply to compete for the title of Best in Show and prize money. So we typically get about 100 applicants of startups in upstream oil and gas. One of the rules we put on the application is they have to tell us as the selection committee which of the SPE technical disciplines they align with. Our goal is to disseminate technology within SPE for our SPE membership. So although there's plenty of technology startups out there that are fascinating, we try to narrow it down to be applicable to our membership as SPE. We choose down to 12 competitors. We actually choose 3 or 4 alternates just in case. And then as they compete, we eventually name a Best in Show, 3 rising stars, and then we let our audience choose a People's Choice Award. Then the second half day is kind of a meet the expert session where we gather industry experts who are experts in the startup arena about getting funding for your startup, how to bring a new business to life, how to market it better, how to grow, to get some feedback on the way you fund yourself, where you allocate your funding, the hurdles that others have experienced with getting startups off the ground, how to get acquired, how to go public, all those types of things that are interesting to both technology buyers and technology entrepreneurs who are trying to think maybe I should start my next company. This year we had 12, these are the 12 competitors from this year, just to give you a sense of the variety of the companies. We've tried very hard in the last 2 years to make sure we have some green elements and a sustainability bent. We worked with the Gaia group to make sure we were completing our profile of companies to meet a variety of different technological needs and industry needs. And if you've ever looked at the list of technical disciplines within SPE, we continue to get broader and broader, and it's actually quite difficult to represent every discipline in SPE and to only choose a few companies from each discipline because we have so many good competitors every year. So our panel of experts who are in the selection committee are trying to choose companies that have demonstrated maturity in their thinking and their process for bringing their company to life, and have also set themselves up best to actually take off in the industry. So what's unique about this event is the selection committee and the judges are not personally investing in any of the winners. It's not like Shark Tank. And the money that is awarded is not an investment, it's prize money. We do the prize money because small companies can always use a little extra cash. But the idea is the exposure that the sponsors get and the judges get and the people in the audience get is they want to see which companies are the up and coming bright spots in our industry and might be a great investment for one of these companies that's either sponsoring or sitting in the audience, et cetera. So we do look at them as where might be a good investment dollar going based on what we see in the selection process. Then they all pitch for 6 minutes apiece and then take 2 minutes of questions with a panel of judges, 5 or 6 industry judges. We usually have judges from companies like Chevron Technology Ventures, Hess has a venture arm, Shell has a venture arm. We have sometimes Halliburton and Schlumberger each have some of their own investment arms, but technology experts who are versed in identifying and acquiring technology, as well as identifying and investing in technology, which are two slightly different paths. This year, the winner of the competition was HiveCell. They have an IoT edge device that was pretty cool. So they got named, best in show and took home a $35,000 prize. Again, 100% funded by our sponsors. The 3 rising stars were Cheetah Networks, Spotlight, CRA Tubulars, each taking home a cash prize. And I think Spotlight was also the people's choice. So we opened it up for judging by the audience to pick their favorite. And I think there was another $1,500 we gave there. In better times, we've had more prize money, but I'm pretty pleased with this group and our sponsors to be able to supply us with so much cash to give away in a depressed market that we've had the last 2 years. It's been difficult, but it tells you something about the appetite for new technology, investment in technology, and as I was talking about, how companies are shopping for technology and where they think that they might find the next great thing. This event is highlighting and bringing some tech to the forefront that maybe they hadn't seen before. The experts, just to give you a sample of what we did in the Meet the Experts section, we had 2 fireside chats bookending the event where we talked to some CEOs of some young but not so young companies that have kind of gotten over the startup hump. You can see if you're thinking about starting your own company, we had someone from Shell talking about, how to engage with someone like Shell if you want to get funded from them. Tudor, Pickering, and Holt, if you know that company, Deanna Zhang gave a great talk on how they see the industry investing in technology and startups. We had another startup, Will Foyles from Project Canary, talking about how he got his off the ground. And Narendra talked about getting Teal off the ground. I think some of you from UT Austin may know him. And then, like I said, I closed it with David Lowe, the CEO of Virum, who has some experience with a couple of different startups and how he sees the industry of startups and investing in technology. So that we plan to do this event again. I think we're having our first study group meeting coming up in a few weeks. It will be associated with the ATCE in October. We're hoping everything's going to be live at the George R. Brown in Houston this year for the first time in a couple of years. My ask to you guys and everyone on the call is, if you know a startup that is interested in getting more exposure in oil and gas, please have them apply. If you're interested in volunteering, we always need volunteers. Also, if you and your company are looking to help us sponsor this event, we'll always be knocking on doors for sponsorship dollars there. I am typically the MC of the event, and I help with some of the coaching and the selection committee, and I help try and chase down some of the funding as well. But I'm passionate about the event, and I think it's yet another way the Society of Petroleum Engineers helps us get technology out there and in front of people to help us make a decision on how do we have a better industry and advance ourselves faster. So with that, Charles, I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions on either topics.
Sounds good. Well, Bryant, thank you so much for kind of going through both there. I appreciate that. So yeah, as Bryant mentioned, if there's anyone in here that has any specific questions, please just go ahead and like raise your hand, or I think we have a group that's manageable, so you can just chime in whenever you want. So go for it. Otherwise, I've got a couple ones that I've written down for sure. All right, I'll get things kicked off then. So this is going to go back to the high tech versus high touch debate. A little bit of context first. So I feel like I've now kind of been in both territories, between being a consumer and also a provider. And I guess my question for you, Brian, is, what is your approach? And do you foresee a concern of being so heavily leaned into high tech that as a provider, you then run the risk of losing basically engagement or losing insight into what the needs are in the industry, and then not having that connection for innovation? What's kind of your suggested approach to resolve that?
It is, first of all, it is a huge concern. The company I'm with now has a tremendous investment in automation of many of our internal processes. And we are working with our customers on doing things like self-service and trying to make it easier to acquire and deploy technology faster. And I am still a big believer that there's value in human interaction and you can learn from each other. But it is an ongoing question of, as you outsource more, which is the whole point of my presentation, finding where you bring value. And when I talk to my team members here, and we talk to our customers on a regular basis and ask the customers, what are you looking for? What kind of information do you feel like you're missing? A lot of it is, from a technology company, well, what's next? You guys don't ever post on the internet what's coming next. Please bring your director of R&D and come tell us where you're going with the technology and where do you see the trends. And that's why I like about professional societies, is because you can talk a little more forward thinking without committing to things. But I think that will continue to be a play, particularly if you're going to invest a high dollar amount in a technology that you really need to spend multiple years embracing and tuning. If you're going to get married to a technology provider for multiple years, you want to have a better understanding of their roadmap and where their investment cycle is. And I think it's still going to be a while before that kind of information is self-service in public. And I still think that you're going to get to a point where some technology application that most of the people I've dealt with that are on the operator side or on the buying side are very creative and know the nuances of how their business is unique than some other things, and want to bend the technology a little bit out of shape or use it in a slightly different way. And before going and presenting that to their leadership that they want to do something out of the ordinary, they oftentimes like to brainstorm it with the technology providers and say, okay, look, I'm thinking of using this in a different way. Do you think it'll work? Oftentimes, the technology provider goes, did you know someone just did that in Australia? And we had another customer do it in the North Sea. It's never been done in the US, but here's how it's gone. Those types of things, I think there's a lot of value in having those discussions, which, to sum up the question, requires people to still make themselves available and known to the buying community. one of the reasons I tell everyone I've ever worked with why you should be in your professional society is because people talk to people that they've met before. And buyers and sellers are members of professional societies. And throughout my career, I'll get a phone call from someone who says, look, I have a question about this. Regardless of whether I know the tech or not, you start that networking that way and say, well, I know someone who does know it. And the way technology providers, in my opinion, need to continually to be visible and available, a very effective method is things like in your professional society where people can meet you. Because the days of cold calling or showing up in a lobby are quite difficult now. Those who sell technology, one, can't go to the lobby. Two, nobody has a desk phone anymore. Finding their cell phone or finding a receptionist to pass you through is harder and harder. So networking, it's actually becoming more important as a technology provider, even though, as I said, the scales are really tipped. You just are brought in much later in the process.
Great, thank you. That was a really comprehensive answer. Christopher, it looks like you have a question.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Brian. Again, I really appreciated the time today. I really enjoyed your talk. My question is more in terms of the startup software companies, and especially those that are not based in the US. Specifically, US market is, I guess, is the most appealing market for selling oil and gas related software. But for those companies, the startups that are based out of the United States, what do you think the specific challenges beside the team is not in the US? They probably have an issue with the customer support, the time zone issues. Beside those typical issues, what would be the other challenges with these international companies that are trying to get into the US market?
So I think there's several angles to the question, Christopher. One is initial awareness of what you're doing and who you are. Oftentimes builds from your local, wherever you are locally. And so let's say you're an offshoot university in the UK. You probably have professors and peers and friends in your geographic region that know who your company is and can help you get some initial trials and technology deployments locally. The challenge I see a lot of startups is their decision on when they want to leave their region and what's the best time to do that. So you may build a startup in the UK and say, my goal is the shale market in the US. I would say some startups take too long to just cross the ocean, literally, to go try selling because they want to become more established. And then they get frustrated with how come these companies don't see the value I provide. I've got 12 case studies in my region, whether it's in UK or India or China or wherever. I've got all these case studies and successes. Trying to expand in the US, you have to remember that the typical North American buyer says, yes, but have you done anything in this region of the world? I would say that the international technology providers within the regions, within India, I see a lot of credibility like wildfire there, and then moving within European countries is a natural. But there is a little bit of not invented here in different parts of the world. I would say that a natural question I challenge technology companies is, why are you looking at the US and not China for what you're doing in technology? Well, one is a language barrier. So a huge challenge for startups when you're talking about their growth and where you're going to invest and where their market applies, if you don't have a good plan for your language and your currency and how you support in a different language, you're forced to end up in an primarily English-speaking nation. And that is a hurdle for a lot of technology companies. And I think it gets disguised as, well, the US market is so hot for oil and gas, and then we'll go somewhere else. In certain countries, like when you're in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or Abu Dhabi, where English is spoken so well. But if you try and sell very complicated software that has a lot of words in it in China, you're going to be asked to localize. Same thing in Russia. If you try and bring software into Russia that doesn't have Cyrillic in it, you're really going to struggle. So as a startup looking at where do I go and how do I go, there's a lot of little hurdles there. I think the next logistical challenge, though, Christopher, that I think is getting easier is the logistics of, okay, if I want to go sell to the North American market, do I have to fly over there on an airplane? That is dwindling. And now with Zoom and we can do time zones, a lot more, and COVID has forced it, frankly, a lot more tech companies can now present all over the world, regardless of time zone. And that used to be a big, big hurdle. And you can get companies off the ground in different countries, not being local. I would argue, though, that you will quickly have a challenge with traditional buyers who are like, man, I just wish someone would come over and talk to me or come see me. I think the jury's out still on what COVID has done to technology sales, hence why I wanted to talk about this. I don't know if that hurdle will remain. I know that it's been, I just worked for a startup before I came to Aspentech. And the reason, it was a Calgary-based company and we were expanding in the US. And one of the reasons we were expanding was we had been traveling from Calgary down. COVID stopped the travel. So we had to get more resources on the ground just to try and sell locally. It's a logistics challenge. I don't know if I answered your question, Christopher, did I?
Absolutely, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, see, I've been contacted, I've seen several trends that they have a startup, they have their core developers in a different country, and they just have a sales representative basically in the US. And although the sales representative is trying to sell to the US customers, the whole developer branch is basically abroad, and there's like issues, issues in communication, issues in support, other issues related to to any technical challenge that can come up during the software development. But the other thing is very appealing, because the cost of the software developers in Asia might cost 1/10 of the software developers in the US. I think that's the appealing part. And I was just wondering if how we can overcome these challenges. I think you've shed a good light on all of those. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me add just another comment, Christopher. And my wife's a professor of communication, so I guess I'm, this is my mindset. But one of the things that is a huge challenge in this scenario you painted is just translation of what is the problem. So English as a second language in one country where the developers are, and English as a first language, or vice versa, right? If you've got, I used to sell into Mexico a lot, and working with Pemex engineers, I have West Texas Spanish. I went to high school in Midland, so I was like, I can go down there, and they tell me their problems, and I go back to R&D, and I couldn't translate it that way either. And so my boss was from Spain. She understood the problems, but there was a dialect change. So actually, her translation of the problems forward. And I would say that we still have the problem English to English in the US, speaking to a customer who says, I have these certain problems, turning around and talking to your R&D group and saying, this is the problem, can we fix it? It all comes down to communication. And again, this is why my wife has a career in teaching this, is there are a lot of fundamentals in communication that we as engineers are not good at, scientists are not good at. Absolutely. Number one is the listening. We just don't listen properly. We don't check for confirmation of, did I hear you properly? And it's that secrets game or the whispers game of translating it back. But the flip side is, if you've ever worked at a startup, you say, well, I'm going to bring my number one developer and put them right in front of the buyer and say, here, we'll fix it. Well, a developer is a developer for a reason and not a salesperson or a marketing person. And so even that's a language barrier that needs communication. And I think the companies that figure it out are the ones who are the best at understanding and translating the challenges. But then on top of that, picking their battles and saying, these are the ones that we can attack and we can fix, and these are the ones that we can't.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Does anyone else in the group have questions? Okay, I want to go back to the note you just finished on there, Bryant. Picking our battles. That one sometimes tends to be a pretty common under theme in a lot of technology problems that we encounter. Do you have any good examples that you'd be willing to share in terms of, knowing when to take a step back from either trying to solution a technology or develop a technology?
Maybe one example just to talk about is, at one point in my career, and I'll try and stay agnostic here on the names, I worked for, it was early in my career, I worked for a very high-tech software company that had what I genuinely believed was the best, most complete, most thorough software application on the market to solve the problems that it was designed to solve, and had the best science behind it. But it was incredibly difficult to use. The more we spent money into the UI to make it easier to use, we didn't realize for a long time that the number one competitor not only didn't have as much high tech in it, not as much high science in it. We would argue that this was in the advent of Windows, and Windows was really ramping up, and people were moving from mainstream or mainframe computers to DOS-based computers to now taking the power of Windows and giving engineers the ability of drag and drop capabilities. The concept of a wizard, and I remember a lot of hot debates. My company refused to build a wizard into their software, and our competitor had one. And our argument was, ours is too complicated for a wizard. It's got too much capability. There's too many levers to pull and push and bits and bobs and things like that. A wizard doesn't make sense. And so our company consciously said, we're not doing a wizard. And has had success in industry in its own lane. That competitor that has stayed simple around the science and has maintained the need for a wizard and that they're valuable and useful has also had success. But it's an example of two companies with two different philosophies where you could spend a lot of engineering resources and money on building a different interface to do the same science behind, or you can say, look, this is just who we are as a technology provider. We'll continue to invest in the science, and we have to put more effort into the teaching and implementation and teaching customers how to use the tech. But that is it's a battle that I've dealt with, particularly being in software. My whole career, when you go argue with R&D, they'll tell you, yeah, but aren't you impressed with what it does? And like, yeah, but no one knows how to use it. You know, this fight between UI and science. But the other is, man, it's easy to use, but is that all it does? Can it really not solve that problem? Like, no, but it's easy to use. I think companies have to, when you pick your battles, one of the questions is, what is your market? And what's your buyer? It's a classic economics question of, am I going to, sell cheap little widgets with a 0.001% margin on every one, but I'm going to sell a billion widgets, or I'm going to sell 5 widgets which each have 50% margin on them. It's tough in the tech space, and that's one of the things I like about the Startup Village is the feedback that the judges and the coaches give to the startups is saying, look, if you came into my shop with this pitch, I wouldn't buy because I think you're spending your money on the wrong things. That's why those coaches are so valuable and the investors are valuable, saying, I know you think that's important, but you're not going to get our dollars because we think you're going the wrong direction. And it sometimes takes a harsh outsider to give you that kind of, in my opinion, spend your money somewhere else.
Yeah, I like that. It's basically, identify your core values as a product and then stick with it. Try and stay in your lane to an extent. Don't veer too far off the path. Okay. Well, I'll throw one more question at you,
Sure.
Unless someone else wants to override me. So you kind of briefly touched on it as wrapping up the high tech versus high touch. You had your sales pipeline basically of making it an actual business proposition.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think is ideal to put in basically like front loading as a provider, helping a potential consumer know what that business proposition should be? Like, basically, are you already coming in and saying, like, look, I can influence your ability to accurately forecast by X%, which at $50 a barrel is this? Or are you just staying a little bit more agnostic and saying, we're really good at it and we can improve your accuracy?
Yeah.
Where do you think is the sweet spot there?
I'll tell you, I've worked for companies that have always been gun shy about putting pricing and value prop publicly available. And I think our industry is leaning towards it's going to have to change a little bit because there's already certain technology. But the reason being is the common thinking was, if my price is public, that means I believe I'm a commodity. And most of us technology providers think that we're special and unique and that we're not a commodity. And that the only things on the market today that have published prices are deemed commodity. And I don't want to disparage any particular technology that's there, but that's kind of the common thinking, that is, if I'm publicizing my pricing and I'm just doing reverse bidding, or I'm only available for auction, then I've considered that I'm a commodity, and I'll have to differentiate in either a reputation of quality or aftermarket service or bolt-on sales, things like that. I'd say one challenge that is probably not going to go away anytime soon is the publication of impact on a real case study. So when you say that this particular company used our technology to solve a certain problem, and the impact to that customer was in the magnitude of $5 million a year in savings, or X barrels per day increased production from this field, now requires two people agreeing to publicize information. It's the consumer saying, well, I'm going to admit to the market that this was either the value of my well or the inefficiencies of my existing production, or things like that, as well as the provider saying, I'm comfortable telling the market what I sold it for. And I'd say that, at least where I'm employed and where I've been employed, that's still a real tug of war that we struggle with. But my gut tells me you're going to see more of it come out, because it's going to be demanded by the buyers. I think in the short term, it's still going to be a buyer reaching out and saying, tell me price, tell me value prop, and you send it one-on-one. It's not going to be publicized too soon, just because there's, at least in the West, in the Western part of the world, the perception that published prices equals commodity. Until that social stigma goes away, I don't think you'll see much of a change anytime soon. I'm not as familiar with how the eastern part of the world is viewing that concept, particularly with national companies and them requiring to publish to their to the government and to the country what they paid for something. It comes out in the wash. It comes out publicly anyway if you know where to go look for
it. Yeah. I think we share a similar viewpoint on that then.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll just open it up as like a general discussion. I don't know if there's anything specific that you'd like to see us kind of talk up as the group here, or if there's any other things that are of interest for talking about within this digital solutions space or the startup technologies for this afternoon.
Well, I'll just give you a comment that I'm pleased that this group is getting off the ground. I'm a data person myself. I believe in analytics, and I believe that our industry has a voracious appetite for this topic, data science, engineering, analytics, and that's not going away anytime soon. And as compute and outsourced compute just gets greater and greater, and our ability to crunch more and more numbers, the need's going to be there. And so I think if your section continues to remember the mission to disseminate technology, you remember that, but you continue to look at how do I make it where it still becomes understandable and consumable, and how do we make the industry better? I think there is a interesting professional society like SPE, this interesting relationship between academia and industry, in that we need the science projects and we need to push technology for the sake of pushing technology. But the reality is it has to at some point become usable and real. And I think professional societies like SPE can help bridge those two worlds by bringing technology forward and then saying, okay, how might it be applied? And I would encourage you to continue to have an academic presenter and then a real life field person talk about the problems they face, balance those two.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And again, appreciate the insights there. And again, agreed. It's basically our kind of vision or goal is to be the facilitators, to allow the opportunity to share some more of the science experiments, so to speak. But then at the same time, at the end of the day, it's gotta make sense economically. So yeah, ideally we want to be the bridge between the two.
And as a as a technology supplier who's been an SPE volunteer forever, you're really never going to have a shortage of vendors who want to speak. You're always going to have to tell them to stop being so commercial, and that this is not a sales presentation. This is a technology dissemination. And I think you will always have a struggle getting an operator to speak, and you're going to want those in your programs to balance. Every section across the world struggles with that, except for the sections that are built like around Pemex or around some of the national oil companies where they're hosted by those. Then you've got a steady feed. But just keep the good fight going and consistently ask your operators to speak and contribute, because if you do become a steady group that's only vendors, it kind of loses some of the point of what SPE is trying to do, is recruit people from both sides and give them comfort that they're not going to be sold to all the time. It's actually technology discussion. That's an SPE challenge we faced forever.
And probably will for quite a while going forward still. Awesome. Okay. Well, unless there's anything else that people are interested in talking about, I guess we can do a little bit of a earlier wrap up. And then again, Brian, I really want to extend our sincere gratitude for you being our speaker today. I found it incredibly insightful. There's a lot of things I'm already mentally noting and going to be trying to be a bit more apt on when I'm working through my new opportunities here. So again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. I enjoyed it.
And then I'll probably reach out about volunteering for the startup village.
I like it.
Yeah, again, thank you so much, Brian. Really, really enjoyed that. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.